some of you may have heard about this story, but it's been percolating for a while. George Washington University is named after, go figure, George Washington. And the moniker that is connected to that is George Washington is the Colonials. The mascot is George Washington dressed in his Colonial Army outfit, his uniform, when he was leading the revolution. They decided at GW to remove the Colonial mascot / moniker because idiots at the university decided that it was too closely connected to the idea of colonialism, even though it's the basic exact opposite of that, because the colonial army was standing up against Great Britain, which had created colonies, and we were all fighting for our independence, even though the basic history of this is not in any way similar. They decided if people are upset about it at GW, they would remove the colonial moniker. And here's what, and I know this has happened to your school too, Buck, Amherst, because we've talked about this before with the Lord Jeff, right? And his questionable history.
Alleged bioweapon usage, but they didn't really understand microbiology.
Smallpox
at that point
blankets.
In time. So I don't think that's really fair to say, but he used to be a very festive fellow with a long flowing, white, the wig, right?
Yes.
And breeches. And, he kind of looked a little bit, he looked like the bad guy in all the American colonial movies wearing the red coat.
Yes.
And they got rid of him and they replaced him with the mammoths. I always say mastodon, but apparently the paleontologists out there, probably not actually a paleontologist, whatever. You get what I'm saying. It's the mammoths, not the mastodons. So we had to change our mascot too. And they've had this going on all over the country. I mean, this has happened in so many places, and it's because what's really I used to say, just wait until people find out some of the practices of the Vikings.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of slavery, a lot of rape, loot, and pillage going on with the Vikings as a cultural practice. That was what they did, the Viking raids. Interestingly enough, the word slave comes from Slav, actually. It's related to the word Slav, which no one seems to know this, which is Eastern European, because of the Muslim Ottoman slave trade in Eastern Europeans. That's actually where we get that English word slave from. People say, oh, what about that slave trade? I don't even know. Subject for another time, but it was massive and lasted for centuries, and no one in this... No, you walk around Harvard and say, talk to me about the Ottoman slave trade and white Christians from Eastern Europe, and they'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, because slavery in America only has to do with the time that there were slaves in America, and it's as if it never existed anywhere else. And I'll give you another example. Julius Caesar, pretty well known for enslaving people, right? We've got Caesars, which is the huge gambling company, with all the statues to Caesar inside of the Vegas hotel, which, by the way, is a fantastic Vegas hotel. And I thought you'd appreciate this. So a bunch of my friends who also graduated from GW, a lot of liberals, right, who go to GW, think this is beyond absurd. And I just want to read you what GW released here, Buck, because I think you'll like it. And by the way, this is the exact opposite of education, which is about curing ignorance in some sense. This is theoretically why universities exist. The special committee identified a significant difference in connotation for the term colonials. For supporters, the term refers to those who lived in the American colonies, especially those who fought for independence and democracy. For opponents, colonials means colonizers who stole land and resources from indigenous groups, killed or exiled native peoples. These are perspectives that cannot be easily harmonized, the committee concluded. Use and popularity of the moniker would therefore not be continued. And one of my buddies, who is, I would say, pretty left-wing at this point, just sent to me the text, respectfully, these perspectives cannot be harmonized because one is literally incorrect. And what we've reached, Buck, and this is to me emblematic of the larger issues at university campuses, is people are so afraid of telling college kids, you're wrong, you're an imbecile, we're not going to take into account your perspective because it is historically in error. Just because you think it doesn't mean that there is a factual basis to support it. That used to be, Buck, when you and I were in college, there were still professors who were willing to stand up in front of a classroom and say, okay, you can have that opinion, but it is factually not rooted in reality. You are wrong, and therefore you should educate yourself, which is the purpose of universities. Now they bend over and genuflect and bend the knee at all these college kids who believe inaccuracies, factual untruths, and actually change things for them.
Truth is not a defense against emotions, even emotions rooted in ignorance on the modern college campus. And that's been true for a while. There used to be, they were kind of rogue professors, because I had a conservative professor as my thesis advisor, Hadley Arkes at Amherst College, pretty well known in Northeastern conservative academic circles. But he was one of the very, I mean, really, in some ways, the only one. But you could still do it these days. I mean, even what I was just saying, if you talk about the derivation of the word slave, if I walked into Harvard in a history class and said, "Hey, who here knows that the first foreign war ever fought by the United States was actually fought? The first foreign war was fought largely to end slavery, and it was actually slavery in that context of the North African Barbary states enslaving Christians in Europe and in America. We were fighting, obviously, because of America. That's where we get to the shores of Tripoli." That would upset a lot. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't even be able to talk about the history of what really happened, because it's so important to the left to create this perception that the only place that really had slavery was America, and the only slavery that existed was the enslavement of Africans as part of the transatlantic slave trade. So even talking about the other historical realities of slavery throughout history, you mentioned Julius Caesar. There were obviously slaves in ancient Egypt. We go back thousands of years. Slavery was a condition of humanity. Unfortunately, it's immoral and evil, but a condition of humanity for as long, really, as there have been organized societies. My favorite Julius Caesar story, though, since you mentioned Caesar, was when he was captured by the pirates, and they ransomed him when he was a young man, and he got angry at them for not demanding a high enough ransom and ordered them around as though they were his servants. They could have obviously killed him at any point in time. And while he was still their captive, he told them, this is written about in the histories, "This is all fun, guys, but you know that I'm going to come back and crucify all of you after you've ransomed me." They ransomed him, got a huge payment, and then he hired effectively a private navy and army, went back, went after the pirates, crucified all of them.
Julius
He wasn't
Caesar.
messing around. I mean, you say that about him.
Until the Ides of March, things are going pretty well for him. Julius Caesar story that I like, and obviously this is from ancient Rome in general, is they would always have somebody when the emperors rode through and everyone was, saluting them and praising them, whispering in their ear, basically, "This too shall pass," with the idea that your godlike status as the leader of this country is not going to exist forever. But yes, you're right, Buck, on the historical front. See, I was a history major at GW, so people say, well, what can you do in response to decisions like this? I'll tell you, they are always asking me for money. Like every university, they are always asking me for money. And I emailed yesterday, and I said, I will never give you $1 for the rest of my life. And so, look, I enjoyed going to GW, but at some point, you have to make a decision. And I don't mean just me. I mean everybody out there listening, to make financial decisions when choices like these are made, to let them know that there are consequences to those choices. So their chances of ever getting in my money, gone forever.
Whether you're talking about how did the left completely dominate universities, or how did the left come to completely dominate not only Hollywood, but also now big tech, the social media platforms, the Walt Disney Corporation. I mean, look at the politics of corporate America in the era of BLM, and recognize that radical left politics became not only fashionable, but mandatory in the boardrooms of most of America's biggest companies, really. How did we get to that point? For decades, the left has used whatever leverage they have and whatever bullying they can get away with within these institutions, and where their dollars go, so they either boycott or support with their dollars places that do their political bidding. And it really is just in the last 5 to 10 years, I'd say, that conservatives are woken up and saying, no, actually, Disney fires Gina Carano, who's a great actress and a conservative. Cancel your Disney Plus subscription.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't take these basic steps, you're actually not going to ever affect any change. And you're not even going to be meeting on the economic and political battlefield the left where they're actually winning day in and day out. You're not going to change the game at all.
Yeah, and here's what else I would say, Buck. All these people on the board of trustees at George Washington who are symptomatic of the issues that we're dealing with in this country, you didn't solve anything. Because removing colonials is just going to enable and encourage the wing that is canceling American culture to eventually decide you have to take George Washington's name off the university. Because the same argument you can make about colonials can be made about George Washington himself.
But see, this is fascinating because this is where you start to see these and the left really likes. There was like, why are all the top universities so left wing? Must be because we're brilliant. No, because you're Bolsheviks and you eliminate all other ideologies from your sphere. You know, it's like if you put the wrong kind of fish in the aquarium, it eats all the other fish. That doesn't mean that all the other fish shouldn't be there. It means they got eaten by the fish. The realities that they're going to face, though, are whether you look at some of these schools. Yale is obviously the one that comes to mind because it is named for a slave trader.
Yes,
folks, a slave trader. A slave owner is bad. Slave trader also really bad. But Yale is it's really a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund where they also teach classes. And so if they change the name, I mean, do you think Princeton University wants to go back to being called the College of New Jersey? No.
I mean, they branded themselves, but this is where it leads. And this is where Trump was right. Remember when he came out and everybody misquotes him about his response to Charlottesville? But he was right. He said starts with Confederate soldiers. And this is why I've always objected to pulling down monuments and memorials to anything historically in America. You can contextualize it better. But it is going to be the case that now that colonials are gone, the new target is going to be George Washington himself at the university. No one ever says on the progressive movement, okay, we're good now. You know what? You changed this for us. We're great. This is solved forever. This is my issue with mascots in general. There's never enough.
You even see this in the medical community now. The World Health Organization, we didn't talk about this yesterday. I mean, actually, we'll come back.
Yes, that's what you call.
They're changing the name of yet another virus, folks, because, and this is because racism, they're saying.
Yes.
That's what they're saying.
Go figure.